Kelly Shaw with RMSO. I would like to show you a lake near the summer snow line on Mount St. Helens in Washington and go over my grandfather's up-close daytime encounter with 3 Sasquatch. I've heard his experience many times growing up because I would often prod him to tell me and my siblings about his experience. Because I trusted my grandfather, Dewis Shaw, his experience that I heard for the first time when I was 8 years old turned me into a lifelong Bigfoot enthusiast and still motivates my search for answers with this modern-day mystery of Bigfoots. This is my 3rd expedition to Mount St. Helens in less than 5 years. I would like to go over his experience. Dewis's encounter happened around early fall of 1938. Several of him and his friends did a remote backpacking trip to a small remote lake on Mount St. Helens. They did this annually. One year, they even summited the volcano during their yearly camping trip. This particular year, there were 5 of them, Dewis and 4 of his friends. The hike in took a couple of days. Back then, there weren't as many dirt roads built as there are now. They chose late summer and early fall when the berries were in season and the fish were usually biting well, because they did not want to pack much food to help lighten the load of their heavy backpacks. Can you imagine back then? The canvas tents and the heavy sleeping bags. They did not have the lightweight backpacking gear that we have the luxury of using today. Dewis was a little over 20 years old during this backpacking trip. After the 2-day hike to the lake, they set up camp and decided the next morning, Dewis and another guy would try to catch some fish. The other 3 young men would go collect berries. The next morning, they did just that. The 3 guys foraging for berries stuck together. Dewis and the other fisherman went to the opposite side of the lake and split up. Dewis remarked that the water was so clear he had to hide behind foliage and cast over it so as not to spook the fish. Luckily, the fish were biting, and he had caught a few when all of a sudden he started to feel uneasy, as if he were being watched. The hair on the back of his neck seemed to stand on end, and then he got a whiff of a foul, rotting smell. He started to look around, and directly behind him, only 20 to 30 feet away, were 3 giant humanoid creatures covered in dark brown hair, head to toe, standing at the tree line. Dewis was a large man, around 6'4", and the smallest of the 3 was just as tall as him. However, it was much wider at the shoulders, much thicker, and weighed a great deal more according to what he was looking at. The next was a foot taller, and then the 3rd was even a foot taller than that one, putting each of them at 6 feet or better, the next one over 7 foot, and the other one over 8 feet tall. Dewis was overwhelmed with adrenaline from fear and panic. He wanted to run. However, these 3 giants staring at him were blocking the only direction he could run. If he wanted to run, the only option he had was to leap into the lake and swim. Because they just stood there staring at him, he decided his best option was to calm down and keep doing what he was doing. He cast in his line and began to fish again. Shortly after that, he caught another nice trout. Reeling it in, it dawned on him that these creatures may be here for his fish. He unhooked the trout and tossed it to them. The smallest of the 3 Sasquatch stepped away from the tree line and retrieved the trout and brought it back to the other 2. This was a relief to Dewis that they were interested in his fish, so he tossed another fish to them. The smaller of the 3 Bigfoot retrieved it again. Dewis threw another fish at them and began to cast and fish again. When Dewis grabbed a really nice 4th trout to toss back to them, they were gone. Dewis grabbed his equipment and ran around the lake in the direction of the other friend who was fishing too. After finding him, he said, "We got to get the hell out of here," and began to tell him what happened. They headed back to camp looking for the other 3 friends who were foraging for berries. When they got to camp, they were already there picking up camp gear and in a hurry and in shock. They stated they ran across 3 giant hairy humanoid creatures while out berry hunting. More than likely the same 3 that walked up on Dewis while he was fishing. It took the group only a day to hike out, downhill and motivated by fear. 4 out of the 5 of them had seen these 3 Bigfoot. They did not know what they were. They had never heard of anything like that. In the 1930s, the term Bigfoot had not even been coined. After that trip, they never went back to Mount St. Helens. They changed the location of their yearly backpacking trip. My grandfather stated, it wasn't until the 1967 Patterson Bigfoot footage was shown in theaters across the nation that he finally had a name for the 3 giant creatures he had a close-up encounter with. Bigfoot. He encountered exactly what the Patterson had filmed, except for there was 3 of them. I hope you enjoyed a look at a Bigfoot sighting hotspot. There has been a long history of Bigfoot sighting reports at the Mount St. Helens. Our group still receives a couple of new reports from this area each year. Washington is the #1 reported Bigfoot sighting location in the world. Truly a Bigfoot hotspot. I hope you guys enjoyed. Keep on watching. We're going to keep on squatching. Our first Bigfoot expedition to the Mount St. Helens area, we were staying near the shore of Yell Lake. And the very first night, shortly after setting up base camp, we started hearing Bigfoot vocalizations. Some people not very far away sounded like they were target shooting. It was really upsetting to us. Thought it was going to totally ruin our Bigfoot expedition because the Bigfoot were going to go into the next county. Well, from 3 different directions, Bigfoot vocalization started up. Most of the vocalizations, these screams, I believe the Bigfoot were upset. This was our very first night, very first time there. Talk about beginner's luck. And then our second expedition out there, we found a really nice trackway of Bigfoot tracks between Mount St. Helens and Mount Adams, actually closer to Mount Adams, which is a short distance away. We were only like 20 miles from the Mount St. Helens volcano, and one of the tracks, it stepped really close to the creek, and its track filled with water. It was so deep. Really neat impressions. This last Bigfoot expedition to St. Helens, we found another set of Bigfoot tracks in Ape Canyon. Can you believe it? Ape Canyon. It was crazy. Jenny and I were hiking into Ape Canyon, and it was an unusual hot day for the Mount St. Helens area. It was like 95 degrees at the beginning of the day, and as we were going into the forest, I was like, man, everything is too hot, hard-packed. Even if there's Bigfoot around, we're not going to find any tracks. Well, this particular Bigfoot jumped from an embankment across the animal trail we were on and hit with such force that it didn't matter that this was hard packed. It sunk in. Jenny found the tracks. It was just an amazing expedition. And then finally getting to the lake area where my grandfather had his sighting. Amazing expedition.